Hi everyone. So I want to talk about the rhetorical situation. It's a concept that we will constantly be thinking about all semester, so it's really important and it's an important part of any type of communication. When we think about the rhetorical situation, there are four main components to it, so I'm going to talk about and break those down in more detail, but the four components of the rhetorical situation is purpose, audience, genre, and stance. So I'm going to go ahead and break down each one of those in a little bit more detail. Purpose, you ask yourself whenever you communicate or write, is you ask yourself this question: why are you communicating? Is your purpose of communication to entertain, persuade, inform, discuss, inspire, etc.? This is determining your writing and communication in general's purpose. So you start with that question to kind of think, first of all, what's going to dictate your purpose, why you're communicating, asking the why. When you think about the second component of the rhetorical situation, it's audience. And you ask yourself this question to begin to think about your audience. Who is your audience? And now you think about this in your everyday life when you talk to somebody. Who are you speaking to, or who are you planning to speak to? Is it a coworker, classmates, a general community that you live in or that you're visiting? A city, again, that you live in or visiting? Customers, clients? My point of this is the way you talk to one person may be very different with how you talk to another person. For example, the way you talk to a child is very different than how you talk to your best friend, right? So when you ask yourself this question in a larger purpose, you ask yourself, who am I writing this for? The reason it's important for you as a student to think about this is the common assumption, and this is understandable, is that the instructor is the audience, right? Because you're thinking, well, my instructor is my audience. They are grading my assignment, and that's fair and it makes sense. But the problem with that is because the instructor created the assignment, you may think that you can leave out certain important information because you think, oh, the instructor already knows this, so I don't have to write that. But important information may get left out. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you want to assume the audience is learning about what you're writing about. So you're guiding them. So you don't want to leave out important detail with that assumption. And also, it allows you to think about what you're writing about outside of the classroom. The goal of the rhetorical situation is for you to pretend that you're not in class working on something. Instead, you're writing about the real situation that the topic is about, the real audience that the topic impacts, and things like that. So when we think about audience, to continue, you certainly affect your audience with your communication, but your audience affects your writing and communication too. And think about what I mentioned earlier. The way you speak to a child is very different than how you speak to your best friend. So that audience affects your language. It changes your language. Knowing who your audience is helps you brainstorm what you want to say. Your audience also connects your writing to their own experiences. They may have different experiences than what you're talking about, but this whole idea of relatability is so important because it's the way the audience can connect to what you're trying to say. So we call this audience awareness. It's important to identify your audience because then if the audience isn't identified, you may make assumptions and leave out important information. You may, as you think about research, you may conduct biased research. And what I mean by that, it's highly opinionated and one-sided only, which is negative. You don't want to do that. You want to have a neutral research plan if you're writing about research in that context. But in general, if you don't identify your audience, it makes your message unclear. You want to be clear in your purpose. So the audience affects the purpose. When you think about the third component of the rhetorical situation, it's this fancy word called genre. What form of writing are you using? That's thinking about the genre. So if you think about an email, a social media post, a letter, a PowerPoint, a research essay, a persuasive essay, a narrative essay, a YouTube video, a website. These are all different types of genres in communication. So when we continue with genres, these are important because genres have something called conventions. And what that means is they are formatted and look a certain way to help the audience understand what your message is. So I'm going to show you a few slides next, and they're all different examples of genres. And think about how they're each formatted a certain way before you even see the visual next to the example. Think about in your mind how it looks, and you begin to form ideas about what those conventions are, and also the language used for each genre changes depending on the type. So when we think about this first example, genre number 1, the image on the right is a text message. But before you even look at that image in your own mind, or if you already looked at it, it's fine, but in your own mind, think about what a text message looks like to you, and also how the language, the words sound, what words you use, and the type. Those are all thinking about the conventions of a genre text message. What I think of a text message, I usually think of short sentences, maybe emojis, the little text bubbles to indicate who's speaking. I begin to think about how a text message looks and the language that goes into it, because that helps me draft and write the message clearly. If somebody told me to write a text message right now, I begin to think about how it looks and the language that goes into it. When we think about genre number 2, if I told you, I want you to draw and design a menu for a restaurant, you begin to think about what goes on that menu, right? But also how it looks. You think about food categories and drinks categories. You think about including the prices, maybe the calories that go into each menu item, maybe the ingredients that are in each menu item, and etc. So you also think, I bring this up with menus, a menu looks better if it's not one long paragraph of different information, right? It looks better if it's designed with section headings that guide the reader to each type of category on that menu. If the prices are all formatted on a certain side of the menu and they use maybe a certain style of font that's consistent throughout the whole menu, all of that is thinking about the conventions of a menu and what goes into it as well. When you think about genre number 3, if I told you, what does an academic essay look like and how does the language look and sound? When we think about the conventions of an academic essay, it most likely has, hopefully, complete sentences. It doesn't have any color, right? It's black and white. It has paragraphs to indicate transitions, no slang, meaning it's formal in the writing, right? There's punctuation. All of that is thinking about the genre of an academic essay. Very different than a text message, right? They're two very different genres because their conventions are what make them different. So genre, when you think about it, maybe what came to mind first is music, right? Music has genres: rock, pop, rap, country, hip-hop, electronica. Those are all genres of music. Rock sounds a certain way, the lyrics maybe are a certain way, versus rap, versus hip-hop, versus electronica that maybe has no lyrics. So when you think about it, you're thinking about those conventions in music, right? The expectations of what rock sounds like, what pop sounds like, what rap sounds like. But you also think maybe of movies or stories, right? Fiction stories. Comedy, drama, horror, romance, action, western. Those are all genres in the fiction world. Comedy, you expect to laugh, right? But if it's something scary, you expect your heart to be racing. If it's drama, you expect maybe to be sad. Romance, you want your heart to beat and the characters to end up together. Things like that. Those are you expecting the conventions of those genres. So the reason I'm bringing that up is essays and writing in general and communication, they all have genres. Essays have genres in the same way that music and movies have genres. Knowing each essay's conventions help you understand its purpose as well. So if you're in a writing class that has essays, you think about a narrative essay. That's where the author tells a story about their life. So you expect to read descriptive detail because it's a little more creative in nature. It's more of creative writing. But if you think about an analysis essay, that's almost the exact opposite. The author evaluates the meaning of something. So there's not a lot of creativity in the words. It's more important that whatever they're analyzing has the detail from that itself. Or if you think of a persuasive or an argument essay, that's where the author is trying to convince the audience using credibility, research, emotion, and facts. Or if it's just a general research essay where the author shouldn't share their opinion about a subject and they have to be neutral or what we call unbiased, that's where the author uses sources to validate different opinions to a topic. The reason I'm bringing that up is each essay in these examples right here are written entirely different and look entirely different from each other. So it's to get you out of that 5-paragraph essay that is okay to learn when you're starting out. But this class, or a type of composition class that you're in, helps you break down those conventions and helps you realize that each essay written in the class are very different. So understanding that they are different genres is a good way to get started with that. And then the last component of the rhetorical situation is something we call stance. That's just what your attitude is when you write or communicate in general. Are you happy, excited, sad, angry, passionate, or neutral, where you don't want to share your opinion? That could be important too, depending on what the genre is. Using tone words hints to the audience what your stance is without having to directly state it. So let me show you some examples. If you compare the two, think about what emotion you feel when you read it. The first one, my blood boiled at the thought of being near them. Their shriek voice drives me to insanity. I can't stand their behavior and negative opinions about everyone. This is more of a mad, angry tone, right? Because words like blood boiled, insanity, negative, they're all words that make me feel that this person is not happy, right? They are unhappy, they're angry. But when we think about the second example, I think of the green mountains encapsulating the gorgeous lake. The fresh air brings me peace. The comforting sounds embrace me, and I am protected. My smile mirrors the sun's rays. Very different than the first example, right? We're getting more of a happy feeling here, a comfortable feeling, a peaceful feeling, because the words like green mountains, gorgeous, fresh, peace, comforting, embrace, protected, smile. Some are tone words, some are just descriptive words. It helps hint without directly saying how somebody feels. So these are some more examples as well with tone. And again, tone is just how an author expresses themselves in writing. I'm furious about losing the game. This is beyond frustrating, and I'm stressed about all of the practice and hard work I put into the preparation. There's an angry tone here. I can't stop smiling, and I'm thrilled to hear the exciting news. What a time to celebrate. And we can cherish the memories forever. There's a happy tone here, very different than the first one, right? Here's a different one that I want you to think about because it's very important with particular essays, especially in research writing, where you can't share your opinion about something. It becomes very technical and not descriptive at all. The research demonstrates that technology can assist in the practical application of classroom activities. However, other research discusses the distraction it may cause. There's a neutral tone here, and why it's neutral is because we can't tell if the writer is in favor, supportive, or against technology in the classroom because they say that it's helpful, but it's also a distraction. So we're not sure how the author feels about it, and that's the goal because it's a research essay. So again, knowing what you're writing about, what the genre is, helps you predict the stance to take. Coconut cookies are delicious. Their sugary crust mixed with the fresh coconut taste is the perfect snack in the afternoon. I actually don't really like coconut cookies, so I don't know why I thought of that example. But I love cookies. But coconut cookies I'm not really a fan of. I don't know what I was thinking when I typed that. Regardless, we're getting a persuasive tone here. The author is persuading you to try coconut cookies. Why? Because they're writing something positive about why they're so delicious. So we're getting a persuasive tone here. So that's just examples of stance when you think about it. So combining all the four aspects, components of the rhetorical situation, meaning purpose, audience, genre, and stance. You've created something called the rhetorical situation. You need all four because they all go together. If you don't know your audience, it changes your purpose. If you don't have a clear purpose, you don't know who you're writing to. If you don't know the genre of your writing, you don't know your stance. They all go together. They all work together. There's no one more important than the other because they work together. If I told you right now as you're listening and reviewing this lecture, if I told you, I want you to send an email to me about missing class, pretend you missed class. You didn't, right? So you have to put yourself in the rhetorical situation of missing class. It's kind of tricky, right? Because you didn't miss class. So you have to think, what would I do if I missed class? Well, I have to mentally put myself in that rhetorical situation. So my purpose is that I missed class. My audience is the instructor because I have to email my instructor. That's who I'm talking to. The genre is an email. So you start to think about how you get to an email first. Also the format of it, right? It's not going to look like a menu at a restaurant. You're not going to write it like a text message where you're like, hey, yo, miss, what's up? You're not going to talk like that. You're talking to an instructor, so it needs to be formal. You want to be respectful, right? So it has words such as dear and the instructor's name. Maybe you end with sincerely and your name. And an email is going to be pretty short, right? It's a few sentences. It's not going to be pages and pages of information. So you thinking about what an email looks like and the language and how it sounds is thinking about the genre of an email. And then the stance is maybe a feeling of worry because you're worried about, you're a little stressed maybe about missing class. So certain words will prove that feeling as well. So combining all those together would help you if this was a writing activity, right? Where you have to place yourself in that rhetorical situation. Thinking about the rhetorical situation helps if you don't know how to get started when you write something because it gets you ideas, brainstorming. It helps you place yourself in the rhetorical situation. But also outside of the classroom, knowing purpose, audience, genre, and stance makes you more of an effective and stronger communicator. It makes your communication more effective if you're consciously aware of these things as well. So let me know if y'all have any questions, but this is something that we'll bring up all semester.